Hi, I am Erica T. Worth, author of the Indigenous literary horror novel White Horse, which is out now with Flatiron Macmillan. And it is about Carrie, who is an urban Indian woman who loves heavy metal and loves horror, but despises her mother because she believes that her mother abandoned her when she was 2 days old. And when her cousin Debbie discovers an ancient bracelet of her mother's, and Carrie touches the bracelet, her mother's ghost begins to haunt Carrie, and a monster invades her dreams, and Carrie decides that she needs to find out what happened to her mother after all. And some of the inspiration for this novel is urban Indian life in Denver, Colorado. And it's also just, my love of heavy metal and horror, which was something where I went to school in Idaho Springs, people loved. And it's also a love song to old Denver.
Hey, it's Well Red Beard. I appreciate you being here. I'm back full time on my channel. I would love for you to come over and subscribe. Just search Well Red Beard on YouTube. I delve deep into horror. I've spent the last 3 years reading a ton of independent small press horror. There's treasure to be found there, and I go out there and find it for you. I'm not afraid to tell you the books that aren't great while telling you the books that are great. I don't break hearts or hurt feelings, but if a book doesn't work for me, I will tell you that, and I'll tell you why. I'm on a new mission now to go back and dig into some great horror from the 80s and 90s. I'm working my way through Robert McCammon's books. I'm going to look at all of Peter Straub's work. I'm going to do Brian Keene. I've got aspirations to go back and do J.F. Gonzalez, a lot of the greats, so you have a good idea of where to start. I have a video up for J.F. Gonzalez's Survivor, so you can see what all the fuss is about. I recently read Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, so you can see what all the fuss is about. I just want you to come over and subscribe. I'm trying to grow the thing. I appreciate you taking a look at it. This is Well Red Beard. I hope you're enjoying all your books as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.
Welcome to another episode of Dead Headspace. I'm very excited for this one, but before we dive into that, you can find us on anywhere you listen to your audio podcast, or for video version, you can go to YouTube. Just look for Dead Headspace. Today, we are talking to a artist, a musician that I have been a fan of, if not when he first came out, pretty damn close to it. His name is Crywolf, but for the episode, I'll just refer to you as Justin Taylor Phillips. Say hi, Justin.
Hey, everybody. What's up?
Yeah, seriously. I don't know when it started, but I do remember that I just found it on YouTube one day, and I started pursuing writing novels in 2013 because that's when my wife and I started dating, and that's when she kind of kicked me in the butt to get my head in the game. And I know that's around the time you started with your first EP. Is that am I in the ballpark there?
Yeah, I think the first one was something like 2012.
Angel?
Ghosts. Yeah.
Oh, Ghost shit. Yeah, Angel's the other one.
Yeah, Angels was the second one. Sure.
So let's just dive into it then, man. This is a big question. Take it any way you want. What got you into creating, just in general? Because I don't know if you did something before the music, but you have this, and I told you, a million times, but you are someone that I hope pursues prose too, and perhaps even screenwriting, graphic novels, whatever, because you have this awesome ability to tell stories in a really unique way. So did you start by writing stories, or how did you start creating?
I played music when I was young, but it was always just sort of a side hobby for me. I definitely never had any feelings like, oh, I'll get into this. But when I think back, it's like, I always wanted to, for sure. It just didn't, like, I'm relatively pragmatic about stuff. And I think growing up, it was like, wow, who really makes it in music? That's so rare. So I pursued a lot of other things. But when I think back to, if I could have chosen my dream life, it definitely would have been like being a vocalist and being able to write in a certain way, like channeling a certain part of myself, sort of writing from that really real, unconscious place. But growing up, I never knew how to do that. And that was always such a fascination for me. Like I would listen to music, and as a child, I was like extremely sensitive. I mean, I'm extremely sensitive now too, but over the years have learned how to protect that. When I was a kid, I didn't know how. So I just cried all the time. Like everything moved me so much in negative and positive ways. So music was just, a huge part of my life. I grew up homeschooled in a pretty conservative Christian family and was pretty deeply sheltered for most of my life. Wasn't allowed to play video games, wasn't allowed to watch TV, really. There wasn't a lot of exposure to the outside world. So the two things that really just swept me up in this realm of imagining this world that I didn't really have, was music and reading. And so I just did those all the time. But yeah, it was always, anytime I would try to write music, it was always like, God, it was like the biggest question of my youth. How do people write the things that they write? Like I would listen to something that would move me so deeply, and then I would write something that seems just like that, but something about it just didn't have that thing. It just didn't strike my soul in this real, authentic way. And so for the first 19 years of my life, that was like my biggest longing, was to be able to write from that place. And because it was my biggest longing, it was sort of like a question that my soul was constantly asking. And anyway, when I was 19, I went on this road trip. I bought a motorcycle, dropped out of school. I had been going to school for economics and international relations. I was originally wanting to get into sustainable development in third world developing countries. And applied to my dream school to transfer, ended up not being able to afford it, even though I got all disenchanted with academia. So bought a motorcycle, started traveling around, and met these kids over in Reno that were just like everything I had dreamed of growing up. Like all I wanted to do was meet like these street kids and get corrupted by them. And it was just so perfect. They were like those exact kids, like the kids that just drive around throwing bricks through the windows of nice cars and like break into casinos and like doing street art all the time. But they were all just like the most brilliantly, authentically artistic people. None of them ever showed their work. They weren't like trying to be professionals at all. They just created all the time. And it just enchanted me so much. It was like all of them had this way of creating things that I'm like, where does that come from? Like, why did you say that in this piece of poetry? What made you write that line? And they're like, oh no, and I'm like, God, it's gotta be something deeper than this sort of methodical, equational based creation that I've been doing for most of my life, trying to emulate. And I ended up doing acid with them for the first time in like 2009, I guess 2008. And I feel like I just absorbed some of their like creative energy through that. And I came back to North Carolina, and I started doing street art. And for the first time, something about the anonymity of it allowed me to sort of give myself license to just make whatever came out, just like, just tapping into that stream of conscious sort of creation. And for the first time, I saw myself start to create things that I was like, oh, wait, where did that come from? Oh, it didn't come from like, it wasn't like derivative of something else. It's not like I was taking something else and trying to synthesize it and put it out there. It just erupted from within me, and eventually started making music from that same place, and just kind of decided to take a year and try music for a while just as an experiment. And it ended up taking off and started touring, and it's crazy. That was 11, 12 years ago. And ever since then, I've been a professional musician. I did not plan on doing this.
Wow. Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. I just want to go all the way back to the sensitivity thing. I think that as a fan of yours, It's man, I just sorry to talk about me real quick, but this is a weird being a podcaster, this type of podcast, it's allowed me to become actual friends with people I'm fans of, like you and me, or me and a lot of these writers that I adore, or one of these
Yeah, it's so
writers,
cool.
Jorah Lansdale wrote Bubba Hotep, this movie I love, and he also wrote episodes for the animated Batman series that I loved as a kid. And I'm friends with him now. It's just it's
Cool.
weird when I'm like, hey, I'm your fan, but we're friends too. So forgive me for having these moments because it takes me a while to get over that. But
Oh yeah,
I
I'm sure it would for me too. I've considered getting into podcasting a couple times, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I can get over that sort of thing. Anytime I admire someone's artistic work, I'm just like around.
it's
I really
weird.
admire people who can podcast and interview people that they really admire because I'm so bad at talking to
It's
people.
super weird. Chuck Palahniuk was surreal. That guy is
Oh
one of
my
the
gosh, I'm
smartest
sure.
motherfuckers I've ever talked to. I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough to even have a conversation with him. But
Wow.
anyways, you should do podcasts, and if you do, I want to be the guy that helps you free. I'll do everything free of charge for you, man.
Sick.
On air, I'll say that. But your sensitivity, I feel like that. I mean, before we even talked, I feel like I could feel, you know, what it's like you can feel passion in people's work, be it art, whatever form it is. But with music, like the way that your music is, your music videos, you don't have to know you personally to know how your heart is, and I think that's helped you. And the fact I didn't know the graffiti art thing. Um, I have a random question. Your motorcycle, was it what brand was it? I personally like Indians. Um,
Oh,
they're too much money.
I was about
They're
to
too
get
much.
I was about to get an Indian earlier this year.
They're beautiful, beautiful
But
bikes.
like those bomber scouts. Have you seen
Oh,
those? Those things are so sick. The little cafe racers that they have. It was a Honda Shadow, a VT
okay.
50. Yeah.
So, what do you think you talked about how that opened you up, and that just basically gave you a license to be free with everything. Would you say that was the catalyst for who you are today in finding your voice? Because as a writer, like for a prose writer, for me personally, and it's different for everyone, it took me about 6 years to kind of find my voice, to finally feel like I'm not writing I'll put a famous name out there. I'm not writing like Poe. I'm not writing like King.
Mhm.
I'm writing like me. It took me 6 years to finally have that click moment. Um, and it took a lot of different pieces. And there was one person that I can attribute that finally helped me push over the hump of that. But for you, with your voice as a musician, a vocalist, and all that, would you say it's those people in Reno that helped you, that started that finding your voice?
Yeah, I think definitely they sort of showed me an example of what somebody who is fully inhabiting their own voice, their own unique voice, looks like. I think I just had not really seen people like that before. I had listened to the art. I had digested the art of people like that, but I had never sort of seen how they lived or how they were in person, or what their art that they don't show the world looks like.
Mm.
And it took a little bit to inhabit that same space with music, but they were definitely the catalyst for that, for sure. I mean, I think I basically I figured out how to channel that into street art first, which was a lot easier because it's so anonymous. You do something. The worry is that when you tap into some sort of more stream of consciousness, and by stream of consciousness, I don't mean like just a bunch of babble. I just mean like kind of doing things as they erupt out of you. One of the biggest fears, I think, is that you're going to make nonsense, or that you think about the stream of thought and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. I need to make something that is going to communicate. But with street art, it was easy because if you do something that sucks, nobody knows it's you regardless. Like I never told anybody what I was doing, so it's like, well, if I make something shitty, nobody cares. So that was first, and then it was with poetic writing, and then finally, eventually, it happened with music.
Do you do your own artwork for? I was going to wait until a little bit later on, but Exuvium, your latest album, for example, like that is gorgeous, man.
Dude,
Like,
yeah. The
is that you?
well, it's me in the photo,
No,
but
I mean, but sorry, was that your artwork?
no, man, I wish I could make stuff like that. No,
Because it's amazing.
it's this guy Dustin Hollywood who runs Naked Mag, which is like a pretty famous art magazine, but I linked with him really early on through a label that I briefly released on, and we just really clicked creatively, and he's done my artwork ever since. It's like been so nice just to have somebody that is so involved with my project that they are like the person who does that. I would not release an album with artwork that wasn't done by him. Every single time he does it, and every single time he just like evolves to suit the new stuff. Like he's just so good at sort of figuring out what's going on and really feeling it and then making stuff from that same place.
So I'm just going to rattle off a few. When did you hook up with him? Do you remember what year?
The first one he did it for was Cataclysm.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely
see I started being in the artwork, because he's a photographer.
Okay, that makes complete sense, because I'm looking at your discography right now. Cataclysm and Skeletons, for example, definitely have that same style. Whereas
the more animated style was for the first ones, because I just didn't really want to put my own face on there. I hadn't really gotten to the place where I was comfortable being sort of the face of the project.
It's interesting because Dysphoria, you got that. I'm gonna say it's a mascot. I don't know if that's how you look at it, but that the wolf mask, and it's a certain style, and that's evolved kind of like in some mask killer movies, but it's evolved over the years. It seems slightly variations, but it's pretty much the same look. Did you make that? Because that definitely fits that. I'm not saying it aged poorly, but it definitely fits that time of music, because I read that you started in dubstep. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So the first project that I had was also called Crywolf, but it was Cry Space Wolf, and it was a separate thing from this one. I just happened to be like, I'm going to use that name. But it was just like, that was more just like fun stuff that we were doing. I had a drummer. It was just like thrash, really heavy stuff back when dubstep first started happening. It really excited me because I was a hardcore kid growing up, and it was the first electronic music I had heard that had that sort of like, head banging, really like thrashy sort of feeling to it. And actually the mask came from my drummer at the time. His mom had this like leather mask made for him to wear on stage, and it kind of had a somewhat similar design, and then we sort of worked from that and started using that as one of the symbols, and then it sort of evolved into its own world and lore and everything from that.
Was that, you mean symbol like for his drums, or like a symbol for?
No, like just it became the logo for the project.
That'd be I'm a drummer too, but like that'd be a badass symbol to have.
Oh no, yeah, it was just he just wore the mask on stage, and then we sort of used that mask and started working from that. And developed it into a thing.
Oh, okay. I personally loved the time of dubstep because I got to have some fun with my little brother, and the only time I've tried, one of the few times I've tried Molly was with him. When we were big into dubstep, I didn't really go to clubs, but we went to one in Providence, and I got a back massage from some chick at one point, and like an actual, no euphemism, an actual back massage. I don't know how that happened. And I was just like having a fun time. And we're listening to dubstep, just totally tripping, man. So that's my experience with dubstep. I know that had a short life. So I just thought that I wanted to wait when we were talking on here to ask you about that. That's really interesting. I know we got a lot to talk about with your recent album, but I want to dive into your book, because that can give us a lot of backstory towards the front of the episode as opposed to later on. I think that might be important.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, just dive into it. I don't want to give anything away. What do you want people to know, potential readers to know about it?
Basically this whole double album series, Widow and Exuvium, that are both just part of a double album called Oblivion. They were made during just like the ultimate dark night of the soul. I think it's something that a lot of people go through at around the age that I was, like the end of your 20s, going into your 30s. It's kind of like a second bout of teenage energy almost. It's like, I feel like when you're young, all of the structures of your life, all the paradigms that you use or that you look through are sort of formed based on your parents and the way that you grew up. And then, that teenage energy comes, which is just like burn everything down for the sake of burning things down. And I hate everything, it's like, I don't know. It's really made me appreciate teenagers more, because throughout the years I've been like, I like everybody except fucking teenagers. Fuck teenagers, just bummed out all the time. They just hate everything. They're just rebelling for the sake of rebelling. They don't even know what they want. And now I realize, like, that's the whole point of that phase in your life. You're destroying all the structures that are there so that you can make new ones. And sometimes that looks like destruction just for the sake of destruction. But destruction for the sake of destruction is still positive in the right periods of your life. And so I feel like, when you're a teenager, you break all those things down, and near the end of your teenage years, you sort of start finding your own approximation of what a human being should look like, of what matters to you, how you should sort of structure your life. And then at the end of your 20s, you're like, you start seeing through all of that. You start seeing that, I'm sort of seeing through the same paradigms. I'm using the same structures that I was using back when I was 19, when I just sort of was like, maybe this is the way to live. And so all of the things that gave you joy before start feeling empty and sort of lose their saturation. And a lot of those structures start cracking and showing their, inherent instability. And so it feels like your life is falling apart. It feels like, I just felt like I was going to die. I thought it was like for 3 years straight, I sort of felt like an old man at the end of his life, just sitting on his porch, like looking at his great grandkids and being like, yep, I'm going to die pretty soon here. Like, this is the end. Like, everything's sort of, like toned down, and it's time to go. And it's not like I wanted to make that happen, but I just felt like everything had lost its meaning. Everything had lost its vibrance. I had just seen everything there was to see. And, it was really like a huge existential crisis for like 3 years. I mean, for long enough that I was having a hard time remembering that it had ever been any other way. And so, one of the things that ended up sort of turning that whole period around was going up and staying with some friends in Portland and talking to this guy, Xander, who's now one of my best friends, who had studied the work of Carl Jung really intensely. Mm. And he, I was just telling him about everything that was happening with me. And he gave me a book on Jungian shadow work, which is essentially sort of the process of, it's predicated on this idea that no characteristics in a human being are inherently negative. They can be used for negative or positive purposes. They have growth focused manifestations, and they have sort of death and void focused manifestations. And so starting from that, first principle, you essentially start uncovering what things you've repressed inside of you. Because the other thing that it's sort of the other first principle of shadow work is that everyone grows up observing the world around them and taking note of what gives them and other people acceptance and love, and what gives them and other people rejection and alienation from society. And then they mold themselves to emphasize the parts that give them love and acceptance, and de-emphasize the parts that might lead to rejection. And sometimes that de-emphasis goes so far that it's completely repressed from the personality, and completely denied by your conscious mind. So the process of shadow work is essentially uncovering what those things are that you have repressed, because you have learned that if you were to let them out, they would lead to rejection or alienation or just negative consequences. And everybody has a lot of these things, and the process of shadow work is fucking gnarly. Like, I think it's hard for people to really, and this was a observation that Jung made as well. He was like, it's unfortunate that people only really approach the path of like further individuation or self-actualization, that's like his word for it, when they're in like times of profound crisis, or when like the worst things in the world have happened to them. Like but it makes sense. It's like, if things are going well, why would you need to pursue trying to fix things? So it is something that I feel like people have to be desperate enough to do, because it can be an incredibly painful process, because it's essentially taking all of the things that you hate the most and showing you that you are those things, and that you have those things inside of you, and that in certain situations that you actually hate these things the most in other people, because they are some of the strongest characteristics in you. And I mean, it was a crazy process for me. It was like I uncovered all of these repressed memories. I had been repressing like crazy. I mean, I had this whole other side of my life that I literally did not remember. Like, if somebody had asked me, I'd be like, oh, I'm not like that at all. I hate people like that. And I had just been doing those things, but then just, that doesn't fit with my self-concept. So I'm just going to, snip that out of my memory. And, when you engage in the actual practice of shadow work, a lot of times those memories come to the surface. And I mean, it really sucks to learn that you have embodied the things that you actually have the most visceral, like, negative reaction to in other people. And I just realized that there was this entire sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, this whole Mr. Hyde
or Mrs. whoever, whatever.
Side to my personality that I was unaware of. But the reason that shadow work is important is, once again, returning to that first principle: no characteristic is inherently negative. So a lot of times the things that we're repressing actually hold the keys to our growth, to the things that we need the most. So, for instance, anger was one of the things that I repressed a lot. I learned from my father that anger was only negative, that it only hurt the people around you, by watching him be angry and hurt the people around him. And so I just completely repressed it. I mean, I thought that I did not have anger. There were moments where I would just be flabbergasted, like, man, I just don't get angry about anything. But in reality, there was this whole other side of me where I would get so angry, and all the anger that had been repressed at all these other things would just like flood into these certain situations, and I would just turn into a maniac. And if shadow work stopped at uncovering those things, that would be kind of shitty. It's like I just had to remember that I had like been a maniac and lost friends because I had like went so crazy in certain situations. But the reason that it was important is that anger actually held the key to a lot of the sort of stunted growth that I had. Like, it was the key to get out of a lot of the really shitty situations that I was in, because anger in its negative form can be rage or abuse or things like that. But anger in its positive form is the drive for growth. It's healthy assertiveness. It's drawing boundaries, knowing when to go no against something, whether that's a person crossing your boundaries, or whether that's actions that you're doing that you don't want to be doing, ways that you're living that you're like, no, fuck this, I don't want to be this sort of person. Like, that's the same anger that also results in these negative things. But when you repress the negative, you're repressing the characteristic overall. So I was in desperate need of some life force and drive, the stuff that anger brings, to get out of a lot of the situations that I was in. So the other crazy thing is that a lot of times there are characteristics that you would think you would never want to repress, things that are just like, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful thing, but they get repressed because you're paying attention to the negative manifestations of those things, like sensitivity. That was something that I had really, and it was sort of weirdly enough, it was still coming out in my art all the time. Like my art always tells the truth about who I am, but in
wait, pause on that. My art tells me the truth about who I am. That's fucking beautiful. Sorry, I just had to say it again because I need to hear it twice. That I'm writing that down.
Yeah, I still don't pay attention to it nearly enough. I don't like listen to its truth nearly enough. I'm like, wow, that's weird that I'm making that. But so my sensitivity still came out in my art a lot, but in terms of who I was in society, who I was on a day-to-day basis, my relationship with myself, I was very desensitized to everything. Because growing up, it was a negative thing. Like, yes, it's beautiful when it's, it is beautiful, and it's a beautiful thing, especially when channeled into art. But on a practical basis, oh my God, what an impractical and inconveniencing characteristic. I mean, just being so easily broken by things all the time. I mean, it was like one of my biggest woes growing up. I just felt like I was so weak. Like, things would happen to me that happened to another kid and they just brush it off. And instead I just like break down weeping, because somebody laughed at me about something. It was always something I hated about myself. And so I had repressed that. And as such, I projected it outwards and was always in relationships with people who were super sensitive, because like my soul craved it, but I felt like I didn't have it at all. And over the process of engaging in shadow work, I realized that thing that I was craving in other people was really one of my strongest characteristics. Like I had also repressed all the memories of me being so sensitive and me crying all the time at things. I was thinking that I was just this like tough, punk street kid, didn't give a fuck about anything. And it's like, sorry, that's just not you. And as a kid, I wanted it to be, it was just a negative thing, the sensitivity. But as an adult, like I love that part of me. And through shadow work, I was able to rediscover that and form a relationship with that part of myself again. And so to bring that, it was like before there were these chunks of myself that were on the surface, and there were all these other chunks that were deep beneath, the bottom of the iceberg. And through shadow work, you sort of bring those things up, and in doing that, you become a much more like fully formed person, a much more whole person. So anyway, I started like just voraciously devouring the works of Jung, especially shadow work, and just really learning everything there was to learn about it for like 2 years. And I started wanting to tell everybody about it. I was just having these conversations with my friends all the time. Like every time I'd be at a party, instead of, going and having a good time, I would be like sitting with a person and being like, oh, and there's this, and you repress parts of your person. I was just like, so like, it was so fascinating to me because I had never thought that way. But every time that hour-long conversation would end and I'd be like, I'll give you a book about it, I never really had a good one to give because so many of them are just academic. They're like written for other psychologists. And, I love reading stuff like that. I love taking complex information and distilling it in my mind to more simple principles. But most people don't. It's not like a common thing that people love to do. So I think eventually I heard this quote from somebody that was like, write books about the things that you feel like a broken record talking about. And
write what you want to read.
Yeah. Or write what you want to give people. That was really like the thing. It was like, okay, well, if there was a book that I could, that would be the go-to to recommend to people to learn about this stuff, what would it be? Okay, it doesn't exist. So I guess I'll just write it. I actually originally wrote this like 20-page PDF document just to give friends, because I'd start talking to them about it and I'd be like, I don't really, okay, let me just send you this thing. Just read this, because like, it gives the whole breakdown. And then, just eventually over quarantine was like, I had some extra time and decided to spend 3 months just writing a book about it. And so the first draft was written then. And I just sort of, wrote it as like a approachable shadow work for dummies, essentially. Just, because I felt like a lot of the information, it had not been really synthesized into simple elements like the way that I explained it. It's a lot of times it comes across as so dense. It's like when I was first reading it, it's like, okay, wait, so archetypes and repression, and there's just so many terms that I didn't understand. But then once I understood it, it was like, this isn't actually that complicated. It's a pretty novel idea, but it's not super complex. So I just wrote it essentially to be the book that I give my friends. And if that's all it turns out to be, then that's fine with me. But I think a lot of my fan base, the people that follow me, it seems like they're always in a similar spot to where I was like 2 years ago. And so I would hope that it'll be super helpful to a lot of them, especially because I've mentioned shadow work a lot, but have never really given a full breakdown of it or anything, any like practical steps for how to engage with that sort of thing.
I'm glad you wrote it, and I'm especially glad that you wrote an autobiographical piece in it, well, pieces, because it really does talk in more detail about, your childhood and whatnot, which is important. It's really important to connect because, writing fiction, if you read about a bad guy being a dick and that's all you know, well, you're not going to have any empathy for them. Not that that's your goal, but like to really understand where you're coming from, which people already connect to your music, they'll further connect with you. And I thought it was really good how you related shadow work, and then this is where why I found it to be essentially one of the most important lessons I could ever learn. And I really loved how you just kind of where you start off, and I had a good experience with it. Did you have fun writing it too, or was it just cathartic, or was it just kind of like a whole shotgun blast of emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I had a good time writing it because I really love anytime I get the chance to engage with other art forms in a more serious way, like really dedicate some time to doing something. And I often don't have a good enough reason to do so, or I don't have time away from Crywolf to do so. But over quarantine, it was like my tours got canceled. There wasn't that much, I had so much free time on my hands, and it was like, oh, cool. I can like be a writer for 3 months and wake up every morning thinking about this instead of waking up every morning thinking about the album that I need to finish or the tour I have to build. So I had a really good time, and it was a pretty straightforward process because I had those conversations so many fucking times. So it was just like writing it was just copying down the, exact conversation I had with so many different people, and then extrapolating on it more when I sent it to like Xander and a couple other people that knew about this stuff to read over, and sort of added more then, and then sent it to you, and with your beta notes sort of zeroed in on some other areas that I needed to go into more. I'm not, it's I think it brought up a lot of questions and sort of quandaries that I don't deal with in my music because my music is so much more poetic and abstract, and this is just direct writing. Things like, how honest should I be about this stuff? How brutal do I need to, how brutal of a picture should I paint? As brutal as it was, or should I sort of soften it for the reader, or if not even for the reader, for the people involved, out of concern for them and their reputation, or, there's just a lot of, it was definitely a new sort of exercise in vulnerability for me. Not just writing about my pain and vulnerable subjects in abstract, but instead writing about them in a very straightforward way where there's nothing that's open to interpretation.
Yeah, I get it. I understand that, and that's what a lot of writers face with. And
yeah, I'm sure
Joe Lansdale said it best. He said, "Write like everyone you know is dead, because then you're just."
Oh, that's good. Okay, that makes me feel better.
I might be missing one or two things, but literally there's just about one thing I won't write about, and that's what my wife tells me about, because she's a social worker. What she tells me about with her clients, I don't write about. That's off the table. And obviously it's private stuff between me and her, but beyond that, I'll write about pretty much anything. And if a friend or family member gets mad at me, I'll probably understand it, but I don't want to look back when I'm an old man and be like, I wish I wrote that how I wanted to,
Yeah, totally.
There is a question. There's a lot of random questions, but this one would apply to what we're talking about now, I think. Username's Tequila. Yeah, I can't talk. And
Tequila?
Just Tequila.
Their username is just Tequila?
Nailed it. No, it's I don't even think that's it. It's just the name I can see. I don't think that's their handle, but whatever.
Wait, hold on. Quickly pause. I just have to pee. And wait, no, I have my wine right here. I can wait to pee.
What if you pee in the wine?
I've tried that, and it doesn't taste the way you'd think it does.
Can I keep this part in? Because that's funny as hell.
It's like I feel like every time you're with people drinking wine, they're like, it would go really well with this if we like peed in it. And everyone's always like, God, that would probably be so good. But when you actually try it, it's not good. It's straight up terrible.
Tastes like piss.
Yeah, it really does. Honestly, it's just like piss, but like with wine mixed in.
Shit. I forgot what I was gonna say. All right, so tequila. Yeah.
Question.
They asked, how do you feel when writing music? Well, we're talking about books, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it can also apply to poetic prose and stuff like that. Well, I guess actually I don't know that the same answer would apply to both, because one I do for a profession, and one I do because if I didn't, I feel like I would die. And poetry is what I do because I would feel like I would die if I didn't, or I would feel like a part of me was dead. So poetry usually is just like, it's only positive feelings when I'm making it because I'm doing it to express something, and it doesn't matter if it's bad because nobody ever sees it besides myself. Music being what I do as for my career, it's more complicated. And I think this is the thing that a lot of people that want to turn their hobby art into a profession deal with, is like, it just totally changed. I mean, I'm sure you experienced that. It's so different when you're doing it as your work, and suddenly it's not, oh, I'm doing this because I want to, and oh, I can't wait to get away and do this. It's like, okay, now you have to do, like, this is something you have to do now. And especially if you have like a complex against being told what to do or doing anything that you have to do, then it can become complicated. So anyway, I think I've formed enough systems that facilitate getting into a space where I'm just like flowing and creating art from a really deep place. So for the most part nowadays, when I'm writing music, it's hard to even say how I feel, because a lot of times I sort of get into this almost like trance space. And I was just talking to a friend about it. It's like the difference between making music when I just feel like I have to and making it from the right place is like, when I'm making it from the right place, doing what comes next is like somebody asking me to count from 1 to 20. It's like every step, I know exactly what's next. It's not a question at all. I know exactly what the song needs. It's like every time I'm making something, the next thing is like, oh, I can't wait to do that. Oh, I have to do this. Oh my God, I have to add this. I have to add this. It's not, oh, what do I do with this? How do I develop it? What should I add here? What have I done in the past? It's like, I know exactly. I've entered a different world, and I'm following all the rules of that world. It's like getting portaled to another dimension with completely different rules, but you suddenly know all of the rules, and then you just follow those rules. And so in terms of what I'm feeling, a lot of times it's more just excitement, because you're just watching something happen through you. And it definitely feels the way that a lot of writers have described it, of like something else is writing your stuff. Like, I don't really write the things. I just sort of like open myself up to the muse or
Hmm.
whatever. So that's how writing usually feels. Whereas like mixing and mastering and finishing tracks, that's just fucking straight discipline. That is not fun. It is not enjoyable to me. That's why my albums get done. Like the writing gets done for my albums in 3 or 4 months, and then the rest of the 8 months to a year before it's released is just the mixing process and just all those little finishing details that really take what's there and make it so people can hear it instead of it being all buried and, you know, clumped together. Like editing for, you know, like it's just like editing for writing. Like if you kind of stream of consciousness wrote something and all the substance is there and you know exactly what it's doing and you're like, it's brilliant, but then it doesn't have any punctuation or something, you know, it's like if people read it, they're not going to actually perceive what it is because it's not presented in a way that's intelligible. So that whole process is like looking back at the stuff that I made while in a trance and being like, okay, all right, I know what's happening here, but how do I fit this all into 2 speakers so people can actually hear it?
That's interesting. Man, you know what? I don't have anything smart to say or interesting to reply with beyond I got another question that I'm really curious to hear about, and this is by Sav D. What can't talk. What Crywolf songs do you think would be good for a wedding? I'm interested to hear that too.
The Lazarus of Westlake from the recent album. Oh man, if somebody played that, it's like literally the worst
Ultraviolent
to play at their wedding. The Lazarus of Westlake is just like about the infinite nature of loneliness. Man, I mean, at a wedding, I feel like most of the elements of romantic relationships that compel me are more, I guess, in the sort of bittersweet elements of it, the idealization, the shattering of these idealizations and things like that. So a lot of it, when I write about relationships, it's much more with a melancholic tone. But I would say anything from the Runaway EP, that's like the only stuff that I've ever written that's like romantic and optimistic in any sense of the word. Most of the other stuff is like pretty depressing. Or I guess some of the stuff from Angels is like the song Angels itself, I think is really beautiful. That's probably what I would play at a wedding.
Yeah, in all seriousness, that's a funny one. That's not a funny one. Dude, my brain is farting up a goddamn storm. I meant to say that's a good one. I need more caffeine too. It's a beautiful song. That's the one where it's Eden? Is it Eden or Echo? I always mix them up.
No, Eden is on Stomach It. That's from Dysphoria. Angels is like Once I Was Afraid I'd Find You.
That's it. Yep.
It opens the album and then it also is its own song later.
That was really so that was like a theme that you had through that album. That's right. That was That's a really neat one. I like the artwork in that. I'm gonna be jumping around with some questions and whatnot, but I'm gonna jump to your I just clicked something. I'm gonna jump to your TikTok. Probably the only time through this conversation when I do
TikTok? It. Oh no.
No, it's fun. Look. This one. So tell me about it, because like I didn't expect that for your content, and I loved it, and it was kind of like zombie-esque. It felt like 28 days later, and it's just fucking nuts, man. Why was that? The just stream of consciousness coming to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird. It's like there's this whole other side to my personality that um has a lot to do with humor. Because throughout my life, I feel like the two things that have allowed me to survive in a world that seems so painful is really beautiful art and humor. And that's always been one of the main connecting points between me and my best friends and the people that I'm in relationships with, is our shared sense of humor. But it's weird that it really only comes out in one-on-one intimate relationships, like people I'm really, really close to.
Or when usually, you drink P1.
What? Yeah. But like, I mean, I would say humor is one of the only other areas of life where I felt as much of a flow state as I have with like poetry and music. And
you
yet
keep
it's
that preserved. Sorry to cut you off. You keep
that. It's like completely not exposed to the world. I mean, it has been like, if like for fans that used to follow my Snapchat, I did that sort of stuff all the time. But or like who used to watch me on Twitch, there were times where it came out, but in general, I think I sort of felt like it didn't really fit with my presentation as an artist. And the most recent relationship that I was in with this musician, Ronit, we had this like entire world of our sense of humor. And, you know, I was never like that around our friends. Like we had this huge friend group and nobody really thought that I was that funny. I mean, I'm sure they thought I was funny in a normal sort of, you know, social way, but not in like that sort of way. Like my favorite thing in the world is being in a relationship with somebody and then just learning how to make them shit themselves all the time by just developing these like 2-year-long gags and things. To me, it's like a really meaningful thing in a world that hurts so much, being able to have these moments of transcendence. I mean, there's a reason that like the Joker or the jester is like seen as one of the most transcendent archetypes. Even though it would seem like this crude or lewd sort of like base level profane archetype, in reality, it's like one of the absolute highest, you know, most like divine energy almost. So anyway, she was always like, you need to, you know, do stuff like this more publicly. And I was always like, it's more special to me because it's only with the people that I really know super well. It makes it way more, I just prize it a lot more. But I think her saying that just sort of made me start thinking about it and being like, why do I censor this stuff? Like when I want to do stuff like this, I'm often like, how does that make sense of me as this like really serious artist? And yeah, over the last year and a half, I've just been, you know, I kind of went through this period where I was considering not doing Crywolf anymore and not being in the public eye anymore. And so when I reapproached doing it, I was like, well, I have to do this in a different way. And one of those ways of doing it in a different way is just not trying to present any particular image as an artist, not being like, well, how does this fit with Crywolf? Just like just whenever inspiration strikes me, just doing those things. And so, yeah, I just like, I used to do stuff like that on my Snapchat. And I would like make an entire crazy video just for people to see it for like 24 hours and then it completely disappears. Like I just loved doing it. And so yeah, I was kind of like, oh, TikTok's kind of that sort of platform. Like it's not like linked with your other things. It's not like it's, I don't know, it seems separate enough that I can sort of just do random shit on it. And I actually have like 2 more of those videos that I just haven't released yet because I don't know when I will, but during that period, I was like just making shit like that all the time, and I only released one of them. I'm excited for you to see the other 2. I think they're way better.
follow you with the Dead Headspace. I don't use a personal one. I just because you know what, I kind of did something like that too with my personal Instagram. Unless it's someone I'm friendly with, like have had a conversation with, and we're friends or whatever, or it's family, I'll remove them. And I got Dead Headspace for like art shit, but my personal one's just for like people to see pictures of my wife and my kid and whatever. So I get the separation there. That's new for me.
Yeah, I think
But
I've always kind of been I've gone back and forth with how much separation I want. Because it's not just like, oh, let me present this image. It's also, I think having a separation between Justin Phillips and Crywolf originally came about because I didn't want Crywolf becoming my personality. I mean, it was something I was doing constantly. I was like, this could easily become who I am, to the point where so much of my personality is intertwined with it that I become so much more possessive over it, that like the idea, that if I make an album that people don't like, it's not just, oh, Crywolf did an album that people don't like. It's like, this is me that people don't like. I wanted to have that sort of buffer between, or in the positive way, oh, if people are obsessed with Crywolf, it's like this feeling that they're obsessed with me. I deserve, oh, when I'm in front of a crowd, it's not, hey, I'm playing the part of Crywolf here and people are like going crazy. It's, this is for me, and then you get ego wrapped up in that. And I just never wanted to like play the dangerous game of intertwining those things.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So just hold off with this question because there's a lot to it, but we've already covered a lot of it. The very last question in the string of questions is it's funny. I don't know if it's meant to be funny, but from ISAPS, I don't know if I'm saying that right. ISAAPS. First question: what is it like to be off records? You just answered that. Being Justin. What do you pay attention to in the world? And all the question that comes in, like what moves you and how do you see yourself? What are your favorite things? And do you like reptiles and stuff? So I could repeat any of that if you want.
Let's see. What do I pay attention to? I definitely don't pay attention to a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things in the world that I just can't let myself pay attention to, or else it just takes
like politics.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I like really paid attention to politics a lot, and I just never saw anything positive coming of it. I mean, I feel sort of guilty about it, like it's some sort of civic duty to be involved in like public discourse about politics, but I don't know. I'm such a like meaning focused person, and it's so hard for me to find the meaning in it. It's in all the endless posturing and one-sided thinking, and just this sort of dualistic view of the universe. So things like that, I definitely don't pay attention to, or sports, or popular figures, or popular music, or I'm really sort of ignorant of the world in a lot of ways. It's very often that I have conversations where people are like, oh, well, you know about this, right? And I'm like, fuck no, I have no idea who that is or what. I'm very focused on the things that I feel a sense of meaning from, and everything else just seems very it just doesn't captivate me or hold my interest in any sort of way. So I'm usually just focused on whatever's moving me at the moment, whether that's a book that I'm reading, or whether that's some music that I just found, or something that I just made, or pieces of writing that I have recently read. That's usually what my mind loops on and fixates on. I'm a very like hyper fixated person, I've realized over the last couple of years. Like the things I focus on so intensely, and everything else just becomes so, it just doesn't mean anything to me, which is the bane of a lot of people who have any sort of personal investment in the way that I upkeep my life, or my finances, or the cleanliness of my house, or things like that. But it's like, dude, if I start making something and I'm super into it, it's like it's the idea that anything would matter anywhere close to the amount that thing matters. I mean, it feels like I'm like staring at the face of God, and then somebody's like, well, you have to, if you don't keep your environment clean, then you won't be very productive. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I just get so obsessed with things, and then if somebody's like, oh, you got to do your taxes or something, I'm like, fuck taxes, look at this thing. I'm learning to be more of an adult in that regard, but also that's, I don't, returning to the whole shadow work thing. Any characteristic can be positive or negative. It's like I experience the negative effects of that in certain daily upkeep things falling through the cracks, but then I also experience the positive of that in the sense that I think that's what makes me such a comprehensive artist. Or like when I do an album or something, it's so in depth because I am able to have this almost medically concerning amount of psychologically concerning amount of hyper focus on something.
I'm like that too, man. That's why I'm recording with you the 176 episode in under 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that it's like, I mean, you look at and you're like, how did that is so, there are things that you can do as a hyper-focused person that if you were not focused on that and you thought about the amount of work required to do it, it would seem completely insurmountable. It would be like, no fucking way I'm ever going to do that. But when you're in that hyper-focused state, it's like, you're not even thinking about it and you can accomplish a lot. So I'm really thankful for that quality of myself, which is why when people shit on me for, being a fucking trash monster when I'm working on an album, I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. I love this part of me. Like the dirtier my room is, the better art I'm making. Like, there's like a direct correlation between those two things.
I've learned something throughout our calls, texts and shit when we don't talk, and it's not like I'm urging like, where the fuck is he? I've learned something where I'm like, when you reply, you're like, oh, I was working on this. I've noticed that like the longer stretches of not hearing from you means the more in depth you are with work, and I get that as an artist. I never get like I never take it the wrong way, but I'm laughing because I can relate. I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I don't really have, I mean, I can see why it's annoying. It annoys my wife when I'm just talking about one damn thing.
Right. But I mean, yeah, it creates strain in relationships for sure because, people don't, I feel like you have to be an artist to take that as a positive. Like, oh, they're not responding. Oh, they must be so deep in something that they're super passionate about. Instead, it's like, oh, they're not responding. They hate me. And I'm like, no, it's because I'm looking at the face of God. I mean, in the way that it feels to me, it feels like that. Like, and then if somebody's like, you haven't responded to me, I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Why would that matter right now?
Then I see you're Into Oblivion come out on YouTube. I'm like, this is fucking great. This like you should make a movie. Are you considering making any kind of documentary or movie at any point? Because I don't know what you do behind the scenes, if you edit the film or video or anything like that, but they're fucking good, man.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm writing the overarching outline for the episode, and certain episodes I got pretty involved in the editing, and then other ones I like left primarily to Wayne Harvey, who's doing this documentary. My friend Johnny did the last one for Cataclysm, and then his friend Wayne in Berlin did this one. And it's more like I'm trying to get better at delegating. So for this documentary, I was trying to do more of like giving notes. Like for the trailer, I had this particular thing in mind, and usually I'm not very good at communicating that. So he made something, and then I was like, okay, give me the project, and then just did the whole, because I did video long before I did audio, so I edit pretty quickly. But then the other episodes I sort of let more like gave notes about things. But yeah, I kind of make the voiceover with the audio, and then it kind of informs where things should go. And and I love doing video stuff. I did both of those music videos for the last album, Ada and Mabul, the Fawn and Cephalotus ones, and that was really fun. But also, like, it's not nearly as rewarding in the end because, like, I don't know, for that, the underwater one, I like spent 4 months doing free diving training to like learn how to hold my breath for 5 minutes, and then it gets like 30,000 views or something, and I'm like, okay, that was way more work than this is worth, because ultimately music is the thing that music and poetic writing, those are the two things that if nobody liked, it would still be 100% worth it for me. It would never be like, oh, why did I make that? Fuck, I put so much work and nobody liked it. It'd be like, oh, well, fuck you guys, I don't care. Like, not like I'd be mad at people for not liking it, but it's just like,
but fuck them.
I like it enough that if somebody doesn't like it, it says something about them. It doesn't say something about the art. But
gotcha.
That's, just because I'm so into it. Whereas like music videos and things like that, I do more with the viewer in mind. I'm like, oh, how can I create this really cool world? And so there's a little bit more like stake that I'm putting into it. If something doesn't do well, it's like a lot more discouraging for me than my albums, because a number of my albums haven't done well, and I'm just like, I don't fucking care. I love it. And then they end up doing really well later, like just being slept on for a couple of years.
That's crazy. I mean, your albums they're high quality, they're great. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't do well.
Well, like the last one, Widow.
Yeah.
I was making like these heavily produced, very kind of high quality, emotional pieces, and so all my following kind of expected that, and then I made Widow, which was just a mess of an album, but a mess of an album on purpose. Like so many situations where I would record a vocal take and like my voice would fuck up, and then I'd be like, yeah, that, I'm going to use that. I'm going to leave that note like off tune, and I'm going to leave this vocal sounding like shit. I'm going to leave this production not sounding clean and just being so messy, because that was the place that I was at. But when I released it, I was like, I don't think people are going to like this very much. And they didn't. I mean, some people were like, people were like, oh yeah, this is interesting, if they were nice. And then if they weren't, they were like, this is a fucking mess, I hate this album. And I knew that people would feel that way, but I made it and I liked it. And then now though, it's like half of my fans are like, that's my favorite album of all time, like that's the best one that you've ever made. Whereas at the time it was like, oh, this is a career ruining failure of an album. And then, there's Exuvium that I just released that I was fully expecting people to feel the same way about, because it's not nearly as messy, but it's very purposefully uncomfortable in certain areas and like purposefully bizarre.
It's like a waveform, man. Waveform goes up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what, not saying it's good or bad, but that's definitely, these tracks don't go linear, or it's not like building up an audience for the encore, so to speak. I agree. That's my perspective of listening to it. Ultraviolet, though, is the craziest fucking track for me. Ultraviolet's the craziest one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this one I was expecting it to do poorly, and instead everyone's like, this is the best album you've ever made. I don't know if I've ever had this positive reception for an album besides Cataclysm. So I just sort of learned to like never expect anyone to like it, because then you're going to make it, you kind of like the write as if everyone is dead. Don't write with anyone else in mind. Just do what you would want to make by yourself, and then expect no one to like it. And then if they do, it's like, whoa, this is awesome. It's a lesson that I've learned so many times and I tell so many people about, and yet I forget all the fucking time. It's like every album that I've ever made that is only for me is the best thing that I've ever done, in my opinion, and then ultimately in most people's opinions. Like every album that people really focus on, they're the ones that I made when I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna make whatever I want. Like Angels was that way, Cataclysm was that way, this last album was that way, Dysphoria was that way. all of people's favorite albums for the most part are the ones where I'm like sort of discouraged about my career and just kind of like, fuck it. I mean, if I already don't think people are gonna like what I'm doing, why not make just the most me thing possible? Because at least I'll like it.
Exactly.
And yet it's so easy. And I'm sure this is something that plagues so many different artists, but it is so easy when you start doing well to look at what you've done well and be like, let me do that again because that did well. Because, like, of course, as a human being, like the feeling of people adoring what you do is so addictive. It's so easy to get swept up in that and be like, well, I could make this new risky thing, or I could make whatever has already been approved by the populace, the product that has already proven its viability. But thankfully, there's a part of me that just I feel like would just rot and die if I started doing that. I feel like I'm just betraying everything that I stand for. So thankfully, that's sort of kept me on the path. But there's still been moments where I'm like, all right, I'm not going to make the same thing, but let me just incorporate some of those aesthetic elements because I know people love that shit,
Yeah, it's evolution.
I always regret when I do that.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, just for me personally, I don't think that applies to everybody, but for me, and part of this is just my personality type. I don't know if you like the Enneagram, but Enneagram type 4s, which a lot of artists are, but it is, I feel like, especially I'm like super, super 4. It's like this obsession with authenticity. It's like, if it's not authentic, it does not matter at all. And I think that really that's why I'm not really exaggerating when I say if I like just stuck with one thing and made it, I feel like part of my soul would just rot and die. It really feels like that. It's like that so much of what makes me who I am, I would be forsaking, just for money, just for success. Like, though part of me also really wishes I could. It would be sick to just like, I mean, if I had made Cataclysm and then just kept making Cataclysm over and over again, God, I'd be so rich. Like, that album killed. Everyone was obsessed with it. If I had kept making that, like, the industry was like, whoa, he made this now. What's his next thing gonna be? And if I had just, and then I put out an EP that sort of tided people over, but then I put out Widow, which is just completely not the same aesthetic at all. But if I had, man, I mean, sometimes I see my friends, acquaintances who do that sort of thing. And it's like, man, you can really fucking kill it. You can start headlining some fucking, 10,000 person venues. I mean, that would be fun. But, there's a part of me that just won't allow myself to do that. So
what's the biggest venue that you have played at to date?
I mean, I've played a lot of. There was a season right after I released Skeletons where my touring schedule was just crazy, and I was getting all these spots on festivals that I was like, I'm playing after that. Who got me this fucking slot? Like, I played Electric Forest at like 9 p.m. on Friday on the main stage, and it was like 10,000 people for my solo set, which was just like fucking wild to me because 3 years earlier I was playing for like 100 people. And then I played with Bass Nectar, who is canceled now, but I did a spot with him in front of like 60,000 people, which was pretty fucking wild as well.
Holy shit.
But usually when I do my tours and headline shows, it's like anywhere from 400 to 1,000 cap venues.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's still really fun. I mean, I love playing, especially smaller venues that are totally sold out. It's like one of my favorite things in the world. I mean, there's all this music that I've just been like in my normal day-to-day life just working on, not in this like sort of elevated, like, whoa, this is the life sort of position at all. Just like grinding on these little mix downs, just like spending 6 hours making 0.5 decibel adjustments to one little zone on a kick, trying to get it right. And, just writing this stuff totally alone. And then I get to go on tour and then hear this huge crowd screaming these lyrics back at me. And it's like, that's always the moment where it hits me that like, that this stuff has its own life outside of me and is living, and playing these roles in other people's lives, and so much so that they know every word to it, and that, to me, that's like one of the most rewarding parts of, even though touring is a fucking nightmare, being on stage and having that experience is one of the things that makes making music so worth it. Yeah, especially music that's really lyrically focused, because if I was writing like throwaway lyrics, like there are some songs that when people sing them back, I'm like, I don't fucking care. These lyrics don't mean anything. I mean, they of course mean something, but they're not meaningful to me. But then there are other songs that it's like, these lyrics are the beating heart of my soul. And when people sing them back to me, it's just like,
That's awesome. So this one person, his name's Mr. Nobody. That's his username. He wrote "The World Needed your handle, Run Crywolf, on a podcast." Have you? I actually don't know the answer to this. I didn't look into it. Have you been on other podcasts before?
No, I haven't.
That's fucking crazy.
And I want to be on more, but there aren't a lot of like podcasts in the electronic music world. For some reason, like I've done a lot of interviews, but I have not been on any podcast before this. And I love podcasts, so I hope I do more. I want to do some more about this album too. It's like fun.
You should. Yeah, I know at least one. He's British, but I know at least one podcast. It's focused on music. I gotta look it up to remember.
Hit him up.
Yeah, I will. After
I got some crazy stories to tell.
Yeah, save it for here. No, I'm just kidding. Spread it around. But had another brain fart, man. My bad. I'm a little sick. Full, people that listen to the show, you'll hear it in my voice. It's a little bit different. So,
the difference between like, it's endlessly frustrating to me. The difference between me when my brain is doing like randomly farting, and me when I'm like just not thinking about it. I can have the worst brain farts. Like I can become the stupidest person in the world when I just get in my head about things, or when I'm just like, when I'm just tired or somewhat sick or stuff like that. And it's so frustrating to me. I'm like, all I can put in my head is like 1 + 1 equals
duck
2. It's like, I hate it.
I want to hear about your book club. Where'd that come from? And is there any update?
So one of the things that I, over this last year and a half, I sort of, I went through that whole terrible period, and the beginning of the end of that was actually me going to rehab. I just like, my life had gotten to the point where it was just so unrecognizable to me. Every time I woke up, I was like, what am I doing? This is just so divorced from the way that from the type of life that really does it for me, that really moves me. As a reaction to that, I was just engaging in like tons of drug use, because it just allowed me to forget that I didn't like my life for a while. And it's not like I didn't like every aspect of my life. I had some amazing friends, and I had, some amazing experiences, but overall I was not following like what my soul was telling me to do. So, anyway, ended up just kind of revamping everything. Moved out of LA, went to rehab, just took a year-long sabbatical from Crywolf, and started traveling. And it was during that period that I started getting really into meditation, not like seeking transcendence at all, but more as a centering practice. Like, I kind of figured out the mentality that I wanted to have towards myself. I figured out the mentality I wanted to have towards the world at large, towards other people, towards creative work, towards my body, things like that. And just decided I just kind of realized that a lot of my problems came from these neural pathways that had been developed that were so so far away from how I really felt and so negative. And it was just so easy for my mind to go down these terrible routes where it would just result in this crippling anxiety and depression, which was what usually prompted me just getting fucked up for 2 weeks straight, was me getting so anxious about everything and being like, oh, well, I can just, and then now I don't feel anything. Cool. Okay, this is great. And so I realized if I really wanted to stop being an addictive person, I needed to stop being in states that led to that sort of thing. And I needed to retrain my brain not to be taking the easy way out all the time. So anyway, God, I have the longest answers to things.
No, that's good. That's perfect for this platform.
Okay, yeah, see, that's why I want to do more podcasts, because the interviews are usually like, dude, we can't write this 4-paragraph response that you had to this one simple
shows go from anywhere to from an hour to 2 hours, sometimes 2 hours and 15 minutes. So yeah, it's all good.
So I started meditating every morning, and just through getting out of my head and really revamping my life, I think it allowed me to focus on myself a lot less, because I was fine for the first time in a long time. And I just was like generally pretty happy. And I think when you are in a really good place, I think that caring about the world really stems, and the juice that you can give the world flows from the love that you have for yourself, or the care that you're investing in yourself. And when you're in a place of, where you feel like your cup is overflowing, it's so easy. It's overflowing already. You might as well spill it into something, versus being in this place of dearth where you feel like there's nothing there, even for yourself. So how would you give to other people? When I started feeling like I was just like overflowing with kind of drive and passion and love and just the desire to do things in the world, I was kind of like, shit, I want to do things for these people that have been supporting me for so long. And, I want to integrate that with my interests, and I don't know, just create a situation where I can have more one-on-one interaction with them, because I do meet and greets after shows, and I do these sort of virtual meet and greets after live streams. And those are always some of my favorite elements of being a musician, is getting this one-on-one interaction, getting to hear people's stories, and getting to give my input on people's problems, or their and not just like people that might be struggling with these like really, really profound questions that, like I said, a lot of times my fan base is experiencing exactly what I was experiencing like 2 years ago, which it's this weird sort of like intertwinedness that I feel like is probably somewhat similar to the way that girls' periods sync up when they're living together. Like, something in like when you're deeply involved with somebody, that like your lives sort of start syncing up. And I think that's why my music always hits really hard for a lot of them, because it comes out 2 years, usually like a year or 2 years after I write it. And so it's usually like exactly pertinent for where they are in their lives. And because of that, when I have one-on-one interaction with them, I just feel like a lot of times the questions that they're asking in life are things that I'm like, oh, I know, I was in the exact same place. And it's not like I have the answers, but I have sort of like, well, here's what I did. Here's, if somebody is in the same period that I was talking about, like this crazy dark night of the soul, it's easy for me to look back at that because it's so recent in my life and go, okay, everyone's different, but here's sort of the direction that I went with this, and it was immensely helpful to me. And that always just kind of, I don't know, it gives this personal, it just makes my work feel so much more immediate and important to me, because usually there's sort of this faceless mass of numbers that are listening to something. Oh, it has this many plays. Oh, there's this many comments. It's like, okay, there are people listening, but it's not like I don't really connect with the fact that this music is sometimes playing such a huge role in people's lives until I hear people's stories and talk to them one-on-one. And so I just sort of wanted to facilitate that connection more. and just it seemed like so often a lot of them were, it was really meaningful for them to have that one-on-one interaction. And I was like, these people have been supporting me so much. Like these intense fans are like the reason I have a career. They're the reason that I can continue making music full time with no other obligations, because these people are supporting me. And I just got kind of overwhelmed with this desire to do something that was a little bit more them focused, instead of just, making my own music and doing what I do and then benefiting secondhand, instead doing something that's more like intentional for them. And, I don't want to do anything that's not for me at all. And I was like, I've really wanted to be in a book club. So that kind of seems like the perfect little in between here, where I get something that I've really wanted to do and that I'm passionate about. I read fucking constantly, especially over the last year and a half. I'm just like reading 2 to 3 hours a day, every single day. And so, it's a huge part of my life, and sharing that with people, and introducing people to works that are really important to me, I thought would be really cool for them. So yeah, we started that up, and we did a whole, I think it was like 3 months or something. We read through The Prophet, which is one of my absolute favorite books. And I kind of made little study guides for each chapter that we went through. And we would just have these 2 to 3 hour meetings every Saturday and go through it and sort of go through the questions that I had prompted, which was cool. But I look forward to doing it with like some fiction work, because The Prophet is more, it's like a Lebanese religious text. It's more of like a esoteric, not spiritual, but just like a wisdom focused text. It's like reading, it's like if you read Marcus Aurelius or something, it's more like philosophical life stuff, the nature of joy and sorrow, or of pain, or things like that. And it's a really beautiful work, but it's more like real life stuff. Whereas like I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like when we're doing something fiction, like one of my favorite sci-fi books or something like that. Like that would be really fun to introduce people to those for the first time, because there are some books that I'm just like, this has changed my life forever. Like I cannot imagine my creative mind without this book playing such a huge role. And it's such a joy for me to introduce friends of mine to those books. So introducing like a larger group, having it be required reading for them, I'm like, yes.
I thought you were going to do Dune at some point, because I saw that in the background, and you and I had talked about Dune when we first started
Dune
talking.
would be a good one. I mean, I do think that like, Dune was the first sci-fi that I read after not really reading for a long time. I had not felt that way about a book since I was a kid reading like Harry Potter. I mean, the obsessive, when Harry Potter would come out, it would come out at midnight, and I would be at the bookstore and I would get it and I would be done with it by the morning time. It was just, and I could not stop. Like that was the first thing that my hyper focus applied itself to, was just like, I mean, if anyone had talked to me while I was reading, if there was anything else I had to do, I would just be like, God damn it. This is the only thing that matters right now. And Dune, for the first time as an adult, I felt that way about a fiction book, because I really didn't read fiction as an adult very much. And I was like, oh, there's a whole world of books that are made for adults, not just made for kids, of fiction books that are like made by really smart people. Holy shit. So it was the first thing that I got really into. But I will say that, since it was the OG, and so many of those concepts are so novel and so fascinating when you haven't read sci-fi. But now that I've read so much more recent sci-fi, revisiting Dune is a little bit like, oh yeah, that idea. Okay, yeah. It's not as striking. And when I've given people like my top 3 sci-fi recommendations, usually Dune is like at the lowest of those in terms of their enjoyment of it, because they've already read a lot of other sci-fi, and a lot of those ideas are not as new to them as they would be if you had not read sci-fi and you just read Dune for the first time. Whereas if somebody hasn't read sci-fi, I'm like, read Dune first, definitely. That will result in like the highest enjoyment for you of that book.
So overall, has it been fun, the book club?
Yeah, it was really fun. I think it was like, I was playing a little bit more of like a leadership role than I would like. I kind of want to, like, when we do the next book, I sort of want to play more of a backseat role, like let other people lead the actual meetings so that I can just be a participant. And that's way more fun for me. At the time, I kind of felt like I needed to take control and steer everything. But I think the group is like really firmly established now, and they're all like really close friends. And I think now I could just sort of like let it go by itself. And then it's just something that every week I get to attend versus something that I'm preparing for and getting in the right headspace and all of that.
Look towards that. That's awesome, man. And I'm really curious. Is there any artists you're open to talk about publicly who are your dream artists to work with? Is there a list? Is there one, a couple? Any genre. I mean, like, if you could, what I like to see in really any art form, music or movies or whatever, is see someone in a role that previously I wasn't aware that they could pull off. Like, I bring this up a lot for movies. Adam Sandler, we're both 90s kids. He was
talking about Uncut Gems.
Yeah. And I thought he crushed it. I saw it in theaters. I personally loved it. I thought he crushed it. And
I love when actors do that. I'm like, I thought they were so lame, and they're actually really, whoa, that's awesome. I love when that happens. I mean, that happened in a smaller way for me with Channing Tatum. I just thought he was like this.
Which one?
Lame.
Which movie?
God, I can't remember what or like Jonah Hill's another great example. He's like the super bad kid that was just like super lewd, and it was funny to watch this young kid saying,
21 Jump Street.
Yeah, 21 Jump Street was like, oh, he's fucking funny, dude. Like, this is fucking hilarious. But then watching Jonah Hill in like, what was it, Moneyball, or like he's done a number of like really, more serious things. And
he's good.
A really good actor and like really moving, as a person.
There's this documentary that came out, and this is kind of relatable to what we've been talking about, where he has it about his therapist. And
I started watching that.
Yeah, I want to watch it. It looks really intriguing. I haven't seen it yet, but it looks really good. And I've also seen other videos where it's just like a string of interviewers poking fun of him, making like jokes about him smelling bad or his weight. I think it's so fucked up. Like, man, even you, like, I'm a blue collar guy. I don't get paid for this shit. Like, I wish I did. I'm not in the public eye like you, in the sense where like there's a few people that listen to the show, and there's quite a few that listen to the show, but it's not on the same level as what you experience. And I bring that up because even independent authors, actually, like me, it seems like other like general humans, I guess I'll call them, they see people doing art, and it's like they think they're allowed to just talk to you however they want. And I've experienced that a few times. I know other people have, and it's very weird that you make something that others will be like, that's not a real job. I mean, it is, but you get those naysayers that say that's not a real job. And do you kind of get what I'm getting at? Like,
yeah, I mean, I get it. It's like when you see an artist operating in abstract, and you haven't seen them you haven't like interacted with them as a person or seen them in an informal setting, they sort of seem more like an archetype or like a character from a book or something.
Yeah.
Like, you read a character from a book, you can shit on them all you want. They're just a character. They're not. You're not
fucking Frodo.
They don't have. Yeah, you could be like, God, I hate Frodo. You're not like, oh, how's Frodo gonna think about? How's he gonna feel about me saying this? I know that he's a real person with real feelings.
He's a real hobbit, man.
So yeah, people do that, and people will do that for my albums or for my tours or something like that, and I'll read something of just some scathing review of what I do where people are just shitting on me, and I'm like, but at the same time, I can't really hate on that because, like I said, I get it. I've done that. There are people that are, I'm not going to name who these people are. There are people who are some of my best friends now that when I was younger, like 8 years ago, I would shit on them endlessly just because I didn't know them. They just seemed like these random characters. It's not like I would shit at. Okay, to be fair, I've never done it online. I'm not like doing it so that they'll read it.
No, I got you.
But
I understand.
But it's kind of the same thing. Like I would do it, talk about them with friends of mine or something, or they would come up in conversation, and I'd be like, fuck that person. And I get that people have that same sort of feeling about artists. It's like they're not going to read this. They're not going to see this thing. They're not going to read these comments and see me doing this. It's like the YouTube comment sections, it's like this completely penalty free. It seems like this penalty free place to just air all of your
grievances.
Yeah. Or Reddit. Oh my God, Reddit. I mean, it's like people just feel like they can say anything because it's kind of this anonymity. And you really don't think the person is going to read it for the most part, I think. So I can't really hate on those people too much because I do see where that comes from. And it's kind of hard to get over that unless you've been on the opposite end of it and realized how much those things can really affect you, especially for artist types who are often so sensitive and so almost fragile in certain ways.
It's crazy to me when I see very publicly one writer talking shit about like maybe a guy that's writing for a show or whatever, not for any bad reason, like you're associated with this guy who's a well-known whatever a terrible act is, but just because like it's a show that maybe for some reason writer A thinks less of and now writer B's writing that. But my point is like I've learned stuff real quick that we are one writer away from knowing everyone. Like I know a bunch of people that are in Stephen King's camp. I can never get him on the show. Like he doesn't do most of them, like most interviews and stuff. I know that because I know his friends or other people like Chuck Palahniuk. I knew him because of a friend of mine who started out listening to the show. And I'm bringing that up because I won't even go out and say anything about actors or whatever because I just think it's a waste of time. But on top of that, like I'm trying to pursue that for the show, so it's fucking stupid. But not even if you're talking about having a show, but as writers in my world, I just always think like you don't know who's watching your feed. It could be a publisher, it could be an agent, it could be someone that you may want to depend on, and this can apply for anything. Someone that you may want to depend on, well, they could see how you're trashing them, or maybe they're friends with the person that you're shitting over, and guess what? You're probably not going to get that potential job.
Yeah, and I mean it's also like I think it goes deeper than just the practical. Oh well, what if people see this and think badly of me, or a publisher or someone important sees this and has a connection to that person that I'm shitting on. I think it also is like I think people that are smart often that sort of thing comes off as really juvenile. Juvenile.
Well, it depends if you're fancy or not, but I say juvenile. I'm not fancy.
Because like I think when I was younger, I always really wished like God, I wish I could just be the person who just says whatever I'm thinking, just like shit on all these people. Because the way that I create art is a very niche thing. It's a very specific way of creating art. To me, it's tempting to feel like that is the way to create art and like that is the standard for art, and to sort of mentally look down on people who aren't doing art from that same place. But I think as I matured, I realized that was actually very like closed-minded thinking. I was taking my own standard for myself and applying it to the entire populace. And that's just not, like people don't have the same, it's not the same standards. They don't have the same thing that they are focusing on, which is sort of the heart of the whole Enneagram thing. And what was so mind-blowing to me to kind of learn more about it is like the core drive that you have, the core thing that you're like, this is the most important thing for a human being to be, that is not the same throughout all people. So like, for instance, my sister, she's a type 1. which is obsession with order and doing things right, doing things that are good. And so, we've always had differences growing up because I was just like the black sheep kid who never wanted to follow any rules. And she was like, but that's not right. That's not the right thing to do. And to me, it was always like, so fucking why would you care about that? Like for her, my environment getting trashed up when I'm working on a creative project would drive her fucking crazy. But that's because for her, that is her priority. That is the thing that in her, the deepest part of her being, that is what makes her feel whole, is having her environment and the things that she does be precise and right. And for me, what makes me feel whole is the things that I'm doing and the things that I'm engaging in being authentic, but also like that sort of feeling like I'm staring at the face of God. Like that is the thing that gives my life meaning. The thing that gives her life meaning is feeling like she's at the exact center of this, sort of like she has done everything she can to perfect the way that she's doing things. And if you don't understand that, it's so easy to shit on other people because you're like, well, this is you apply your standard or the things that matter most to you to the entire world. And if you do that, it looks like everyone else, not everyone, but it looks like a lot of people fucking suck because they're failing by every metric that of how to gauge how well you're doing. And so I fell into that a lot when I was younger and learning how to make art from this really authentic, make the art you would make on a desert island sort of place. It was really easy to look at anyone who was making pop music or making the music they made before or making things that panders to audiences and be like, they are failing as an artist. Because if I did that, I would be failing as an artist. But taking that same standard and projecting it on others was not a very mature viewpoint. It was like a pretty closed-minded and black and white viewpoint. And it's exactly what people are doing in politics. And it's exactly, liberal people, their standard is how do we move forward? How do we look at the next thing? How do we improve the social sphere? And conservative people are like, how do we stick with the strong foundations that we've built and the things that we've already established? And both of them are looking at the other party and going, you're a fucking failure by my metric of what a person should be focusing on. And they're just focusing on different things, but yet they're just in this endless, feud because both of them refuse to stop for a second and be like, maybe in the wise words of my sister, the quote that changed my life but sounds so silly is different people are different. I think when I was 23 or 24, I was back home and I was sitting in the living room with my sister and my brother, and I was ranting about all these people that settle for things and stay in their hometown and work a normal job and just being this very angsty Fight Club inspired teenager mind stuck in a slightly more adult body and just raging against the norm, raging against the people that go with the flow, whatever, people that don't break out and do something crazy. And she was like, Justin, different people are different. It's such a silly thing to say, but I was like, that was literally the first time I ever even considered that. I had just been applying my same standards for go do the crazy, go let yourself get hit by the train of life. Fuck safety. Fuck, building things. You don't need to do that. You need to discover the next thing. And I was just applying it to everybody. And it seems like everyone was just being cowards to me. And I had never considered maybe they don't give a fuck about this at all. And they're actually hey, what about building a community? What about really pouring into relationships and building this rich network of people who support each other? What about doing this and this and this? And then when you go by that standard, they're fucking thriving. And yet I was looking at them and being like, fucking sheeple. It just seems really ignorant to me now. And so my point is, all of that to say, I could, if I look at someone's account and they're shitting on a bunch of other people, and those people clearly have just different priorities than them, to me, I go, it's kind of an ignorant person, and less likely to work with them for sure. So I'm kind of glad that I never got into that or allowed, was you know what? I'm gonna be the person who says what's he thinking, and start shitting on people the way that I wanted to, because
We just had a president that did that. Look how that ended, Justin.
right. I mean, I would have gotten more popular in the moment as like the
Yeah.
firebrand, but I wouldn't be respected as an artist as much, and I wouldn't be able to look back and go, I'm pretty happy with how I handled myself. I would have to look back and be like, God damn it, why did I do that shit? Go delete a ton of tweets.
So, is there any artist or artists that you would love to work with? Dream bucket list artist.
Oh yeah.
I forgot about that until I looked at my notes, man. So I don't feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to separate that from the fact that I get so nervous around people that I really fuck with artistically, that it is so hard for me to collaborate with them. Like, I've gotten the chance to collaborate with a couple of people that I really respect, and it's always just a train wreck, because it's like I cannot access any of my artistry because I'm so nervous. But if I take that element out, like if I imagine, okay, if there was going to be a really successful collaboration with other artists, I would say probably maybe like M83 would definitely be way up there. Alt J, Bon Iver.
Ooh, Bon Iver. Yeah,
Oh, I would love. God,
that would make sense.
Bon Iver was actually like the origin of the inspiration for my writing style. One of the first artists that I listened to that I was like, the ultimate example of like, why would you say that next? How did you go from this to this? And how is it so exactly what you should have said? What logic are you following here that made you put these lines together in this way that just breaks my heart, and I don't even know why? It's like the pure communication of an emotion, like a specific emotion. And I don't mean an emotion that we have words for. I mean like the sort of ineffable, chaosmos of emotions that have all these shades and all these in between points, and we have these central words, but there are all these emotions in between that can only really be expressed by much more abstract lyricism. And he was the first person that I listened to that did that so effectively, and with apparently no rhyme or reason. But then later I learned how to access that separate realm of rhyme or reason that he was really operating in. But the reason that I really got super fascinated with that sort of abstract lyricism was from him. So working with him obviously would be so cool if it was successful. But I do think that if I was around him, I would be like, he would be writing this brilliance, and I would be like, oh baby, you broke my heart. Oh, just make some bullshit. Like I feel like it would be so hard to access those like real places of artistry. I get psyched out so easily.
Oh no, you guys would make good music though.
I think I've learned how to collaborate with people now. I have to make something first and then send it to them, and then that always ends up doing really well. Like my collab with Eden, if we had like gotten in a room and written together, I don't think anything great would have come out of it, because I wouldn't have been able to show up artistically. But instead, I wrote this whole song first and was like, he would be perfect on this to him, and then he wrote like a verse for it, and that ended up working out super well.
So M83, Hurry Up We're Dreaming, that's the only a physical album I own by them, but it's damn good. I got that years ago, and that'd be cool. That'd be real cool to see you working with them.
Yeah, he's just so fucking good. I've been really revisiting a lot of his work recently, and it's just masterful emotionally. Definitely a huge inspiration of mine when it comes to Cataclysm and certain pieces that I've made. Like I really hear the M83 inspiration in there.
Yeah, I could tell. Now is the part of the show where we're going to start winding down. You want to talk about what you are currently reading?
Yeah. Let's see. I just finished The Sparrow. Have you read that?
No.
It's one that's been on my list for a really long time. One of those books that every review is like, this book is fucking amazing. It's completely unique. It's its own thing. And yet the synopsis for it sounded so like uninteresting to me. It was like a group of Jesuit priests make first contact with aliens. And I was like, I don't want to read about that. That sounds so lame. But the God, I mean the characterization and the understanding of not just the understanding of interpersonal dynamics, but the understanding of what's beautiful about lots of different interpersonal dynamics that author has, and how that comes across in her writing. I think it's a her. It's just such a poetic book. Like my favorite things are books that can combine really interesting geeky ideas with like really deeply beautiful poetic prose. And yeah, that book has just been so that the book and the sequel to it have just been really really moving me a lot recently, and it's been a great find of mine. I've also been on the more nonfiction side reading a lot of Richard Rohr, who is this Franciscan monk. Which once again, when people told me about him, I was like, I don't want to read a fucking Franciscan monk. That sounds so lame. But he is a very like forward thinking, like basically kind of a universalist. And just one of those people that you're like, man, you know what's up. You have wisdom. Like he just says things about the human experience that are just so poignant and moving. And so those have been the two things that I've been going back and forth between recently. And man, it's so great when I have a fiction book and a nonfiction book.
Yeah, I bet.
It feels so much, and I just get to like go through because like I said, reading is fucking a fifth of my day. So when I have good books that I'm reading, I'm like just a totally different person.
I haven't read this one. I'm not currently reading it, but I brought it out on my bookshelf for a reason. It's called Tough Voyaging by George R. R. Martin. It's a collection.
Wow. Okay.
It's science fiction, and it's one of his earlier works, and it just felt like something that you would enjoy. But again, I haven't read it, so I can't. I can only say that my teacher could not praise it any higher.
Wow. Okay.
Look at this. This is a book from the 70s, and I love how. I'll get another one. Like the colored pages, it's different from nowadays, but this is by the guy that wrote Psycho, Robert Bloch. It's called Dragons and Nightmares. I just started it, so I don't really have anything to say about it either, but I love Robert Bloch, and this is from the 70s, man. And look, they got cigarette ads in it.
Wow. In a book?
Yeah. Whoa, I didn't know that was a thing. I also don't know what Kent cigarettes are, so that's new to me.
Ads from a failed cigarette company in your book, and not looking, it's not seeing with very forward-thinking eyes for sure.
Yeah, it aged poorly.
You're like, yeah, it'll be fine right now. Think about what people are going to think 10 years from now.
Where can people follow you?
You can go to Instagram is run Crywolf. Are you in Crywolf? And Facebook is the same thing. And yeah, I guess those are really the two main platforms that I post on now. I mean, I have a Discord server, and that's sort of the place that is really the home of Crywolf right now. And sometimes I post a link on Instagram. I guess Instagram is still sort of I don't know, social media is so weird nowadays. It's like I feel like there aren't any social media platforms that are really engaging me very much. It seems like everything is kind of lame and dead. So that's because everyone's on Discord and TikTok, which I just don't quite understand yet. But yeah, Instagram is the place where I will always post what I'm doing. So that's probably the best place to
Not for nothing, just my opinion, but Elon Musk is he is not the right person to run a social media platform. I used to like that guy, and you know what? I'm not gonna shit on you if you like him, but he's such a jackass.
I really have no idea. It's like at this point, anyone who postures themselves as a certain figure in the world, I'm like, is that them? Is that not? I have no idea who this person actually is. It's such a thing now to be a character. So it's hard for me to really know if somebody is like that or if they're just smart. Because like if you're smart and you're just trying to operate in the world and you don't care if people respect you, you just care if you are effective and reach people. It's like be a fucking jackass. Be the Donald Trump, whatever sector you're in. It clearly works.
I don't know if he's even being himself, man.
Yeah, I just don't know if that's really like the stuff that he's doing or if he's just being smart the way that Donald Trump was in terms of being like, oh wait, yeah, we're living in the reality show, the post-reality shows generation. Let me just be as much of a reality show participant as possible, and then more people will pay attention, and people will hate me, but I'm rich enough that it doesn't matter. So I'll just, become popular by doing this. I don't know, because he got everyone talking about Elon Musk. I don't know. So I don't know. I kind of suspend judgment for those people. I really fuck with his visions and stuff. I don't really, I don't know. I don't pay attention enough to that stuff. People keep bringing up Elon Musk Twitter stuff, and I'm like, I don't know.
He owns it.
Making people pay for blue check mark. I don't know. The internet's roasting him anyway, so.
Yeah, you know what? It doesn't fucking matter. You're right.
I don't know. I usually care more about what somebody does than what they're saying. So I've always thought he was fucking awesome. I'd really prefer him not making a buffoon of himself, but yeah, I just don't care enough to really look into it.
That's fair. That's more than fair. If you want to follow the show, you can follow us on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter. Dead Headspace. Different. One's got an underscore, and that's on Instagram. Just look it up. Maybe you'll find us. I don't know. Justin, do you have any final thoughts? Clearly, I give lots of shits that people follow us, man.
Yeah, I mean, I should for sure. Yeah, go follow me. Do me a solid.
Final thoughts, sir.
Thoughts, man. I finished most of a bottle of wine during this interview.
Nice.
Final thoughts. The only actually, instead of following me, just go listen to the recent album. That's actually the thing that I would request that somebody do. And I would say listen to it when you are driving over the speed limit with blood alcohol content slightly above the legal limit, and really angry at something, and then play the whole album all the way through. I am not condoning drunk driving. I'm just saying if you happen to find yourself in that situation and you can't change it, it's already done. Maybe pull over and listen to it on the side of the road. There you go. Better thing to say publicly. Pull over, listen to it on the side of the road. Anyway, when you're in a mood, when you're in just a specific state, when you're angry, listen to the album, read the lyrics along with it. That's the only thing I would request that you do.
I listen to it on the way to work sometimes, which is like 6 a.m. It gets me pumped up, man. Like you said, ultraviolet.
I guess if you just want to use it like a cold plunge of an in audio form. I'm ready to fuck something up.
The reason why I keep bringing up ultraviolet is because it starts switching up halfway through the song, and it gets that's the one at the end where it's got the chorus of Chance, right?
No, that's Firelight.
Oh fuck.
Oh, I was kind of curious that it was Ultraviolet. I was like, yeah, that's the most kind of like poppy song of the album. No, Firelight. Okay, yeah. I'm glad you fuck with Firelight. Firelight is I was actually about to take that off the album until about 4 weeks ago, and then yeah.
Why'd you want to take it off?
I just didn't know how to mix it. The mixing was terrible, and I was killing the mixing for all the rest of the album, and with this guy that I was working with, Austin, And that last one, it just sounded like shit. And I was like, I don't know, it's so chill. It's 7.5 minutes long. And after this super engaging album, it just seemed way too just like relaxed and everything. But I'm so glad I put it on because lots of people really like it. And then I added that last section to it, and I was like, okay, I fucked with this now. The whole like tribal chant section.
Yeah, I like that. That really did something that just beefed it up.
Mm-hmm.
My final thoughts are: I appreciate it. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. I write to your music. We'll continue to do
Awesome.
so. Like I said, for almost 10 years now. I love it. It's really good for my fellow writers. It is really neat to write to. Next episode is 177 with Donnie Goodman and Megan, aka the Horror Babe. The Horror Babe. Justin, it's been a pleasure. And I would like it if you come back. And I've already reached out to Vintage Society. That's the other podcast I was thinking of. I reached out to them already.
Sweet.
So
Awesome.
we'll keep you
Thanks for
updated.
having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm thankful that we got to do this, man.
Awesome, dude.
Have a good night, man.
Yeah, you too.